My name is Jeff. This is the Sons of the American Revolution, Patriot Stories. And we're here with Dr. Nathan Knowlton, who is a longtime member of the SAR and who is here to present his Patriot. And what is the name of your Patriot?
Nathan Knowlton. And Nathan Knowlton was born and raised in Massachusetts, and then my family, Knowlton, is direct lineage from Nathan.
Ah, and when was he born?
He was born in 1760 in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts.
So at the beginning of the war, he would have been about 16.
He was. He was 16 and went in as a fife. He was a musician, and at that time, fifes were used as young children that were in the front.
Oh.
And they were associated with each regiment and each company. Each company had a fife and a drummer. There were 10 companies for each regiment.
Okay.
And each company had a fife and a drummer. So each regiment had 10 fifes and 10 drummers. And they formed a company band. So whenever they got together, at times, they would actually play together, but they were always controlled by the officers on how they were going to portray the battle.
Okay, so we got a 16-year-old. He's a fife player. What's the job of a fife player? What's their function besides being in the band?
Okay, they are the individuals that control the regimentation of the military going into battle.
Okay, are we talking about one of those battles where everybody gets in a line and shoots at each other?
Yes, but the officers would tell the fife what the troops are going to do. So they were the communication for all of the military. So if they were to attack, the officer would tell the fife and the drummer to go to a certain cadence or sound that would tell them to advance or retreat or to go or to get up or go to bed or whatever.
Okay. During battle, as the method of communication, did the fife and the drum player become larger than normal targets for the enemy?
I would definitely say yes.
Okay. So you got a kid out there at the front of the battle,
yes,
making noise, bringing attention to himself, and he's the guy that maybe they're shooting at.
And that's why if you see a lot of pictures, you'll see a drummer or a fife in photographs with always an injury. They would always have a scarf and blood or something on their head because they were targets.
Wow.
It's kind of like the Red Cross in World War II. You know, you have a Red Cross on it. But yeah, that was what happened. But they were ordered by their officers. First of all, regiment, then the company. But they were told how they are to maneuver themselves during that particular battle.
Okay, well, let's start with, when did he enlist?
He enlisted in November of 1776 as a private. And he was commanded by Captain Moses Harrington of Grafton, Massachusetts, belonging to the 6th Regiment of Worcester County, which was commanded by Colonel Dyke from Massachusetts. And he was assigned to the Northern Department of the Continental Army, and the Northern Department was under the control of General Horatio Gates.
Okay.
And Gates' job from the Northern Department was to take on General Burgoyne and move from Massachusetts and New England up to New York to try to get Burgoyne. So during that time period, it said he marched to Dorchester, Massachusetts, passed muster. Passed muster mean that he was indoctrinated and his orders were He had to learn what he was supposed to do, pass muster, and then he continued on in that particular enlistment until May of 1777. So he was there from November of 76 to May of 77, realizing most people were in the Continental Army or they were part of the militia.
Mm-hmm.
He was part of the militia.
Okay.
Okay? So when you're part of the militia, your officers may not be the same officers that, say, for instance, Washington would have.
Mm-hmm.
He's coming from Massachusetts under control of the Massachusetts militia. These officers that he was under were Massachusetts militia.
Right.
So at that point, he came back in September of 77 during this one, goes out for till May, and in September, 4 months later, 5 months later, comes back as a private, commanded by Captain Inglesby of Boylston, Massachusetts, okay? And the regiment was commanded by Colonel Job Cushing. He, at that time, because he'd been a private, his rank was increased to corporal. At that time, they enlisted him as a musician rather than as a fife, because he was getting a little older, going from 16 to 17. So he became a corporal. And at that time, he was a musician in that company. He went with going after Burgoyne, and actually was there in the battles of Saratoga.
There were two, as I recall.
There were two. And of those
August
two,
and September of...
September 16th was the Battle of Freeman's Farm.
Okay.
And the second one was the Battle of Bemis Heights.
Oh, okay.
Okay? And he marched with them at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually was present at the time the Burgoyne surrendered in their presence. And this is documented in the records that he was there.
Wow.
And actually, he said to have heard the salute, the general insulting language, calling Gates, Granny Gates, to his face.
Wow.
Okay? And in response, the story is, yes, I will own the title, for I have just delivered Great Britain of 10,000 men. In other words, gave him the finger and said, hey, I just got your 10,000 men.
Yeah. Yeah, wow.
But he was present at that time, and it's quoted that at that time of what he said by several people, including my Patriot,
Wow.
and documented at that time.
Mm-hmm.
When, if you want to say was interviewed or discussed that, they knew that he was there at that time. But that's documented that he was there at the Battle of Saratoga. He left there and then went down, he said, marched down to King's Bridge to take a fort near King's Bridge. That would be a British fort at that time, and I don't know what fort it was. From there, he went back home, re-enlisted again the third time, and at that time he enlisted in Winter Hill, Massachusetts, which is outside of Boston, and from September of 78 to January of 1779. That time when he basically just escorted prisoners.
Interesting.
So he went with prisoners back to where they were going to be encamped.
I'm surprised by the short enlistment periods.
You're leaving your home.
Yeah.
How long are you going to be gone?
You don't know.
You don't know. Battle's over, where are you going to go? I think I'm going to go home. Remember, they're not part of the Continental Army. They're part of the militia.
That's true too. Yeah.
So they say, hey, I'm going back to Massachusetts. I don't want to stay in New York right now. So they go back home. Battle's over. We won. Let's go. So that's what he went back. So they go back and then they re-enlist. They need men.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you would see enlisted a third time in Winter Hill, Massachusetts. He enlisted and took off again. And at that time, he went with, at that time, Captain Peter Woodbury. It was commanded by Colonel Jerish. And he took prisoners to Providence. Once he got to Providence, I think I'm going home again. I did my job, I'm going home.
Yeah.
So at that time, he went to, because he's signed with the militia. They have him registered, as being in the military.
And by this time, he's at the grizzled old age of 19.
Yes, he's an old man. Okay, so he went down to Charlestown, Massachusetts at that time, and that's when he was discharged.
Okay.
In 79. So he's discharged. So he spent 2 years of the time, about half the time at home and half of the time actually in service. And then he was a farmer. We go on to the story about him, but at the same time, that's his participation in the Revolutionary War. He was never shot, never injured in any way that I know, but at this time he was actually present at a major battle in Saratoga, and at both battles of Saratoga.
Interesting.
And when you're there, remember, he's in front watching everything going on, being a fife and a drummer. But it's amazing to me, though, when we're talking about fifes. A fife is a small flute.
Yeah.
The family of instruments are called flutes. The smallest is a piccolo.
Right.
A flute is a straight board flute. The fife is a straight board flute, as compared to, and it only has 6 holes.
Okay.
So as far as its actual structure, they're all the same, but they're made of different wood. Most of the time they're made of maple at that time.
Ah.
But that's how they used the fife at that time, because it had a high pitch. And those pitches during the battle, or getting up in the morning, or reveille at night, what happens is that sound, they would have to play that sound, time to get up to eat breakfast or so on, or we're going to leave, or we're going to retreat, or we're going into battle, or don't fire until you hear this order.
Right. Wow.
So that's what he would be doing.
A high-pitched note would be very directional. So you could tell, if you have multiple groups out there with multiple fifes, you could tell which direction it's coming from.
That's correct. And they were under the direction of their company and regiment. So their officers would tell them what they needed to do, and when they ordered it, they had to signal the troops to do that.
Yeah.
They didn't have walkie-talkies and they didn't have cell phones, so they had to do something, and so they used the communication as a fife.
Interesting.